Okay, so it is 11:01 now, and so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Su Yang. I'm the instructional designer here on campus, and my co-presenter is.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sally Potter, and I am the interim DE coordinator.
Thank you. This is the second in our RSI workshop series. And so today's session is from comments to conversations, creating feedback that drives learning. Today's focus, we will, if you were unable to attend our first one, again, for this one, we'll still go over our RSI policy here on campus, which provides guidelines to help us better understand RSI for our online classes. We're going to look at student feedback examples and have a conversation on what good feedback could look like. We'll also provide you some guidance on where you can provide feedback in Canvas. Many of us are already using those tools, but I just wanted to provide some additional tips and whatnot on some areas. And then I also wanted to include some of the ACCJC, which is our accrediting um, institution or organization provider. They have resources around DE and what they used when we were going through the accreditation process. And so I wanted to provide those resources for you, which they've provided for institutions to help us to meet RSI. Again, our role here is to support you and to help explain the regulations and policies for DE courses. There are different ways that RSI can be implemented in a course, and it may look different from one course to another. But again, we'll share resources with you to help you learn more about RSI and for you to decide if your interactions meet RSI or not. All right, so why RSI? So in the research, instructor interaction is an essential part of online learning. And when there is instructor interaction and engagement, students just have a better learning experience and they do better. It's also federal and state law for distance education courses. And additionally, if you did not know, the past year and a half or so, we've been our campus, our district has been preparing for our accreditation. And during that process, we did receive a core inquiry about RSI and our DE courses. And so based on the ACCJC rubric, we didn't pass with the 85% or higher. And so that's why we're facilitating these workshops around RSI, providing you resources and information. And I would also recommend having conversations within your divisions or your departments about RSI and DE courses and sharing that information with all of your colleagues. Sally, do you have a link of the FCC policy? Okay, yeah, if you could throw that in the chat, that'd be great. Again, our Senate did pass an RSI policy that provides really good guidance and information for us. I'll be using that to provide sort of a brief overview about DE and RSI. But the big difference between DE and correspondence courses is the presence of RSI. If a course does not pass the RSI test, then it doesn't count as a DE course and moves it over to a correspondence course. And here at FCC, we're not accredited to offer correspondence courses, and so we wouldn't receive any funding for them. If our courses are not considered DE courses, then this could also affect the allocation of the financial aid funds that we receive as well. So there are two components of RSI. Interactions that are substantive, and the substantive interactions are regular. So in the first part, substantive interactions includes the following 5 methods that have been defined here. Direct instruction, assessing or providing feedback on a student's coursework, providing information or responding to questions about the content of a course, facilitating a group discussion regarding the content of a course, and other instructional activities approved by the institution's accrediting agency. For the most part, most of the interaction that we do will fall within A through D. The second component is regular interaction. And so these should be predictable and scheduled based on the length of time and the amount of content in our course. Regular interaction also includes monitoring students' academic engagement and success in a prompt and proactive way when this with the student when needed. In the RSI policy, there is also additional information that's available. Remember, RSI is instructor initiated. Under the additional requirements, there's also minimum required interaction. So, for example, for an 18-week, 3-unit course, it's recommended that the minimum required weekly interaction frequency is twice a week. And so if you teach a 9-week course or whatnot, then you can do the calculations and break down how many weekly interactions you would be required to have. All right, so again, today we're focusing on the feedback that we provide for students. And these are just ideas to help us provide substantive feedback. For example, acknowledging problem-solving ideas and posing additional questions for critical thinking. Personalizing our responses by highlighting student insights, or maybe we could identify areas for improvement for our students, offering clarification on topics or any course material, asking students to apply course concepts to real-world situations or problem-solving exercises. And so in our feedback to students, we can touch on any of these areas to make it more substantive then. And in regards to ideas on how to make our feedback regular, we want to provide feedback early enough for students so that they can make improvements, especially for larger projects or assignments that we have in our courses. We also want to monitor student activity and make sure that students are keeping up with the coursework. If you have a general Q&A in your course, a Q&A discussion board in your course, you want to make sure that you check in that space and respond to any student concerns or questions in a timely manner. All right. We're going to take a look at some examples.
Okay, I put a document in the chat, and I believe that Sue is also going to take a look at this, so we can all look at it together. Okay, so what we have here is, make sure I get the right one up here. Okay. So as Sue was saying, one of the ways that we can provide RSI to our students is, and one of the ways that I'm sure that many of us are doing RSI in our online courses, is giving feedback within the Speedgrader. So there are a couple different places where you can give feedback. One is, within the SpeedGrader, there's a comments box. You can put information in that comments box. Also, if you have a rubric, and you're using that to score the assignments, then there are some small boxes next to each criteria. So you can put feedback there. Another way is you can actually, and I think a lot of our English faculty do this, maybe other disciplines as well. We were talking to a math instructor on Wednesday who said that this is how she gives most of her feedback. Is by actually, within Canvas, marking on, making comments and marking on the students' actual documents. So those are all ways that you can give feedback within Canvas so that it's documented. So what I have here on this document is an assignment prompt from my course. I teach linguistics. This is from Linguistics 10. And you can kind of read the prompt here. What I have the students do is to read about 3 of the different theories that explain our first language acquisition. And so they have some articles to read, a little setup, some articles to read. And then what I'm asking them is, which theory do you think is primarily responsible for the way humans acquire their first language? So I want them to give their opinion, and then I want them to use information from the articles that I provide, or if they have other information, then to kind of give me that their sources. If you go to page 2, this is a student answer. This is a real student from my class this semester. And the student is saying, that they believe the social interactionist theory is the theory that's primarily responsible because of skills in interacting with humans or the environment. Children are taught to communicate through interacting. And then she has a quote in the article. It states children learn language as they have the desire to communicate with the world around them. That's a quote from one of the articles. So this means children want to learn language for basic needs, such as daily tasks in and outside the homes. For example, she gives some examples. They don't learn by just watching TV or listening to others. And also, they don't not just learn language, but how to act, their behaviors as well. So what we've got here is a little activity for you. And so these are some, and again, I forgot to indicate it on the form. This is terrible. These were created in part by ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT to give me a list of different responses to this student, make some regular and substantive interaction, and make some not regular and substantive interaction. So we've got a little kind of activity for you on this Microsoft form, and Sue is going to put it in the chat right now. If you could open that up, and you can actually read the responses within the form. You can also read them on the document. And so what we want you to do is take a few minutes, take about 5 minutes to kind of think about it, and put them in order. So on the Microsoft form, you can drag the responses up or down. So the one that you think has the best RSI, is responding to the student in the most substantive way, really tapping into critical thinking, and the information that this really responding to the information that the student wrote in their response. Put that at the top, and then at the very bottom, the one that is not RSI, or in that order, best to worst. Okay. Okay, are we I see some movement. Does that mean people are submitting them when it moves?
Yeah, we have about 41 response, 42 now.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, and including us co-hosts and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about it. Do you have the view of that shows something different, or is this the view? Oh yeah, okay, there we go. Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like most people thought that the worst answer, yeah, we'll start with the worst. The worst answer was good answer. Yeah, number 5. Yeah, that is definitely not substantive. It doesn't, talk about anything that the student is saying, responding to anything that the student is saying, as well as the second to the worst one. Nice work. You clearly understand the theory. Um, just it just doesn't talk about anything that the student said or respond to anything that the student said. You could say that to any answer. Um, the one that's kind of in the middle is you did a nice job summarizing the theory and providing examples. Some of your ideas could be developed more fully, but overall, this is a solid response. So, I think this one is maybe, on the borderline, not really RSI, but approaching it. Um, because again, it's very generic. It's not responding to really anything specific that the student said. And you could, imagine that as an instructor, you can just copy paste this answer on nearly every answer that you get, and it would, pretty much apply to almost anyone. So let's talk about the good ones here. Okay, so the one that everyone liked was that last one. Your response does a great job of emphasizing the importance of interaction and language development. I especially appreciate your insight about how children don't just learn language, but also social behaviors through interaction. So kind of, paraphrasing what the student says, validating what they say. You made a strong case for the social interactionist theory. Consider adding a bit more direct evidence from the articles to further support your points. So, and then giving them a little bit of, you know, um, almost like, criticism in a way, so that in the future they can make their answers better. And I know some instructors, I do this sometimes if they don't have a good answer or they're kind of off. For some assignments, I allow them to resubmit. So, mentioning something like that would be, great and appropriate here. And then the second one, your response presents a clear and logical explanation of the social interactionist theory. You connect the theory to real life situations, such as children learning through interaction rather than passive exposure. One area to improve is organization. Consider breaking your ideas into clearer paragraphs for readability. So, pretty much covers the same things. It's a little less specific, a little, more generic, but still clearly RSI. This is clearly, responding to what the student said, and, giving them some great feedback and validation on what they said. And then let's look at this next one. You've done a great job explaining the social interactionist theory, especially in highlighting how interaction shapes language learning. Your example about children learning manners through their environment is such a great point. It's also effective that you pointed out that language acquisition isn't passive, it's an active process. Keep up the strong analytical work. Yeah, that one is really a great example of RSI. It's really, very specifically responding to the student in a very positive way. Depending on how you are going to score this one, if you aren't going to give them the full points, maybe you want to point out the reason why. But if you're going to give them the full points, just, great job, keep it up. that's a real strong message. And so, what I would say is there's not too much of a difference between the top three. Those are all very clearly RSI. They very clearly respond to the student in a really substantive way. Does anyone have any questions about any of this?
Should
I
you
have a,
say
oh,
should you say you've done a great job if you've gigged them some points?
Yeah, so that's kind of a style thing, right? Like if you're not going to give them the full points, then maybe that's good try. Instead of great job. Yeah, Linda.
I was wondering too, how does this work in conjunction with the rubric? I guess I was reading right, the rubric is not in and of itself RSI. So do you still do the rubric and then give the comments as well?
Yeah, so that's an option. So that's what I do is I have a rubric for assignments. It's much easier to score, as you just, click, click, click. But clicking, even if you have a very, elaborate and detailed rubric, just clicking those buttons in and of itself would not be considered RSI. However, you could, for your different criteria, that you have in your rubric, you could make comments for each of those things, where you're really, responding to the student. That would be, if you're responding to them in a really substantive way, then that would be considered, really detailed RSI. And then remember, I think we mentioned this a couple weeks ago when we had our workshop, our first workshop. The requirements but I don't think we've mentioned them today. The requirements for RSI, according to our Academic Senate policy on RSI, is that for an 18-week course, you should be doing 2 instances of RSI per week with your students. So that does not mean that if you have like 3 or 4 different assignments per week, that you have to give this substantive, feedback on every single assignment. No, definitely not. What you really need to think about is, doing this in a regular way, letting students know what you're going to be responding to, how you're going to be responding, and how often you're going to be responding. So, for example, yes, yeah. So, so if you could think about it, instead of 2 for each student, 2 for each assignment. Okay. So, for example, we're going to look at an example of some discussion feedback in a minute. But one thing that we often do is discussions, right, in our classes. And so getting into the discussion, once a week and giving, kind of peppering your comments, making them, really reflective of what the student says to facilitate the conversation. So maybe if you have like 30 students, you're doing that maybe like, 6, 7, 8 times. You're definitely not expected to respond to every single student, every single discussion. But if you do that, then that would be considered one instance of RSI. Announcements are something that most of us do. And so if you make announcements and you do them in a regular way where you're giving good content information plus feedback to the students. So for example, I know a lot of people, they have a 1 module per week. They open it on a certain day of the week. And when they open it, they send an announcement. Maybe that it's a short video, or maybe it's just a, kind of like a message announcement, text announcement. As long as you are, encouraging the students, you are kind of explaining the assignments that are coming up. Maybe, they had an assessment last week or a couple weeks ago where people had problems with that. So you're addressing some of those issues, talking about, how you can help them, clarifying some of the issues. The things that we would do in our face-to-face class, right? When you give back a quiz, when you give back a test, those kind of comments that you make about that test to that particular group of students, those kind of announcements, if they're done regularly in a regular way, then that is definitely RSI. So if you have your 18-week course and you've got, what are you doing per week? You are making a weekly announcement. You are contacting students through the Speedgrader to, give them feedback. And, if you miss a student here or there, students turn in something late, or, there are some students that just do an absolutely fantastic job and you just really can't, give them any critical comments, and you just say, this is absolutely great, maybe a little bit about what they said, but you don't have to go into it in too much detail. Or a student that just completely missed the mark and, you just say, no, this is not it. If those are few and far between, but for the most of your students, you're giving them something substantive, then that's going to count as an instance. Another thing we talked about in the previous session is office hours. Office hours count if you're doing a regular office hour every week where it's a virtual office hour and your online students are able to join you, that counts as an instance of RSI. So even if no students show up or very few students show up, a lot of people have also do like a little study session or something on Fridays. 1 day per week, sometimes recorded, sometimes not, where students are able to join, ask questions. Maybe you have a little mini lecture. If that is done on a regular basis, if that is documented within your course, you have it in your syllabus, you're talking about it, then that definitely counts as an instance of RSI. Okay, so I see a lot of questions here. Let's see.
Sally, I pulled them out if you'd
Yeah.
like. Alejandro, you may have already answered this. Alejandro asked, do I need to respond to each student for it to count as RSI?
Yeah, so I think I already, hopefully I already
Okay.
answered that one. Yeah.
Okay. Jacqueline wants to know, says, I'm unsure here, sorry. On a DB1,
Yeah.
you provide an RSI response / evaluation for 2 students? It's a question.
No, so on a discussion board, depending on how many students you have, you definitely, the idea is that you're peppering your comments throughout the discussion. You're going to that discussion, 2 to 3 times at least. And not responding to every student, but responding to enough students so that the other students can see your presence in the discussion. They know that you're there. They know that you're interacting. And probably they're going to read your comments, even if they're, if they see them, even if they're not, to them exactly. Does that make sense, Jacqueline? Yeah,
then
recapping discussion where you point out all the findings or points made, make clarifications. Yeah, that certainly would, especially if that's something that you do on a regular basis. So if you have, that's a really great, actually a really great technique right there is, when you do your, weekly discussion, the day after, a couple days after it's due, if you send an announcement that recaps or even, a post within that discussion, I think that's a good idea. 18-week course, 2 times a week, 1 unit. Yeah. So what the RSI policy basically says is for 18-week course, you should have 2 instances of RSI, and then, or 3, it specifically says 3-unit course, and then you got to do the math if your class is anything other than that. So if it's a 9-week course, you double it. If it's a 6-week course, again, you got to do the math there. If it's a 1-unit course, then probably 1 time, one instance of RSI would be appropriate for that. Yeah. So for synchronous online classes, this is a great question. When you are doing the synchronous portion of your class, that is the very definition of RSI. So if you're meeting with those students, once or twice a week, then that's your RSI. And I will also tell you that for the accreditation team that evaluated our courses, they did not look at synchronous courses at all. They're only looking at asynchronous courses. Technically, if you have a hybrid course, the portion that is online should include RSI, but again, they didn't look at any of those. All they looked at were the fully online and fully asynchronous courses. Yeah, mini meetings. So, as long as they're done regularly, yeah. Yes, so you can copy and paste the same feedback to, to students. That's a little tricky though, because here's what I do. This is what I do when I go to start grading or scoring an assignment. I open up a Word document and then I start giving feedback to students, and then I copy and paste in a Word document what that feedback is. And then when I find the next student who has a very similar answer, you'll often see this in assignments, right? Not necessarily discussions, but in assignments. Then I'll, just copy and paste the one that's relevant. Sometimes you have to tweak a couple words, but for the most part, you can just copy and paste. If you put their name, if you say hi, Joe or whatever, that's awesome. Students really respond to that. They love that. So yeah, so you definitely can do that, and as long as it is substantive, then that is going to count for RSI. You wouldn't want to do that in a discussion though, because all the students have access to the discussion. They can really easily spot if you're, recycling comments. So you probably wouldn't want to do that in a discussion. Weekly discussion boards are not required. However, you got to check your course outline of record. It probably says something about student-to-student interaction. So if your COR indicates that you have student-to-student interaction, then, discussions where students respond to each other is kind of an easy way to do that student-to-student interaction. Other ways would be like doing group projects, having those study sessions, those live study sessions, that kind of thing. Caption. Okay.
Simone wants to know how to calculate RSI number for hybrids.
Yeah, so I'm an English teacher, not a math teacher. So you would just have to do the math on that. If your class is 50-50, cut it in half. If it's some other percentage, then, do a little, I don't know, ratio and proportion or whatever to figure that out. I don't know, ask your math colleagues.
Simone, also look on the RSI policy. There is a statement about hybrid courses. So look at the RSI policy.
Oh, yeah. So if I think, yeah, if you're responding within the discussion and then you give then after the due date, you give a summary. I think, okay, so from the point of view of the accreditors, this is what they're doing. They are they have a bunch of courses that they have to go through. They want to just check off the boxes as quickly as possible and as easily as possible. Most of the time, from the people that I've talked to, the first thing that they do is they look at announcements. That's a really easy thing to do. All the announcements are on one page. You don't have to click around too much. You just have to open a couple of announcements, and you can see the dates, so you can see if they're regular. There's information in there that's clearly like interacting and responding to the students, and they're regular, then okay, boom, done, click, you got that one. If then the next thing that they're probably going to do is look at discussions, okay, because that's probably the next easiest thing to do. So they look in the discussions, they click into a couple of discussions. If they see that there is an instructor presence there, it's not just students only interacting with each other. If it's, you're more in there more than a couple times, then, and the responses that you give are substantive, then okay, then they're going to check that off. So what I would say to that is, if you make if you give that feedback about the discussion, if you make an announcement, then that is, and you're doing that regularly, you're doing that every week or every other week whenever you have your discussions, then that's really clearly, yeah, two different instances of RSI. And then probably the last thing, they might also check your syllabus to see if you have a communication policy, if you're telling your students how often you're going to be interacting with them, because that is going to tell them where to look. But probably the last thing that they're going to go to is the SpeedGrader, because to get into the SpeedGrader, you've got to click into the assignments, click into the SpeedGrader, kind of go through each student. It's a little more time consuming for them. And again, they have a lot of classes they have to look at. They want to just kind of check you off as quick as possible. Let's see, Sarah. What if you provide comments when grading their discussion that provide overall feedback for their entire thread? It is not posted to the discussion board. It is added as a comment in grading. Yeah, that's also an alternative way. So instead of making an announcement for everyone, you just post that to the feedback. I think that would count, even though it's the same for all students. Let's see. Yeah, so you can store comments in the feedback library, and Sue's going to show you exactly what that is in a few minutes. I don't really love that very much, because the feedback library follows you around to every course and every assignment. So, unless it's something that is pretty generic and pretty general, it's probably not going to count as substantive for the student, unless you start to get like a massive number of comments in there. And so that's why I use a Word document to start collecting my comments for each assignment, rather than using the feedback library, because I find that you just have to scroll a little bit too much, and it just is not that useful, if that makes sense. Also, David, give us your last name. Yes, and we're going to show you that, Kat, in just a second. Okay, lots of questions about Studio here. I'm just ignoring them for now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to go to your next one?
Yeah. Let's, okay. Let me, these are, okay, here we go. Okay. And then while you're pulling that up, I'm going to talk about the Discord server. A lot of instructors are using Discord, or they're using publisher content or some other, website. That's obviously that's RSI if you're interacting with them. However, the accreditors cannot see that. They do not have access to that. So if that is the only place that you are interacting with students, then your course is not going to be counted as one that meets RSI. So just be aware of that. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time. I see Susie just sent me a comment. I just have to say this, that she says we should add a workshop where all you do is just ask questions. Yeah, definitely. That's easy to prepare for, at least. We don't have to make a PowerPoint for that, really. Okay, so this one is about discussions. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but again, this is a real live discussion that I have in my Linguistics 10 class. And what I do here is have students watch a TED Talk, and it's a discussion, and then in the discussion, they pick out one detail, one thing that the speaker said that really interested them, and kind of summarize that, tell why it's interesting to them. And then for the replies, then they respond to each other. And not every discussion that I do requires replies. It's probably a little more, maybe like 60% require replies, 40% do not. When I'm facilitating a discussion, what I want to do again is, respond to students in a way that makes them think about things, ask them questions, ask each other questions, respond back to me with anything that they have. So that's kind of my goal. So for this particular discussion, there are about 4 things that the speaker says that students usually find interesting. I've been using this TED Talk for a lot of years, and I just kind of noticed that. So I kind of know what they're going to say already. If we want to scroll down to the activity number 1. Okay, so this is what the student wrote in the discussion. This is what they have posted. Something interesting that Lara Bardaretsky mentioned in the TED Talk was that language affects the way we see time. The way we English speakers see time is from left to right. We see time moving in that direction because we write from left to right. She did show an example of a timeline of pictures of her grandfather growing up. English speakers arrange the timeline pictures from left to right. On the other hand, a speaker of Hebrew or Arabic does not see time the same way. They see it from right to left. It's interesting because a language doesn't only change the way we speak, but it can also change the way we think. Okay, so we've got a little activity again for you. There are 4 responses here. Again, mostly generated by ChatGPT. And what we want you to do is mark the ones that you feel are RSI. Maybe they all are. Maybe only one is. Give you a few minutes to read through those. Okay, we are running out of time quickly, and I know that you'll have more questions as we go. So I'm going to just let you know that you guys are really smart. Yeah, the first one and the last one, definitely RSI. They're very substantive. They definitely respond to the students. However, that number 3 one, yeah, I remember that part of the TED Talk too. It was surprising to learn that different languages affect how we arrange time. It makes sense since we read in different directions. Great observation. I think that counts as RSI as well. So I put that in there because, you know, you don't have to write a dissertation for every response that you give students. It doesn't have to be the, you know, the greatest thing ever, that, you know, that you are, you know, responding to them and teaching them and, you know, giving them more information in every response. But really, you know, just the idea is that you're showing them that you actually are reading their work, that you're responding to their work, that you know, whether you give them some kind of, you know, feedback to help them improve, or you are praising them and validating what they say, that is definitely RSI. The number 2 one, you know, that one is probably on the borderline of not being RSI, you know, even though it does mention time, which is what the, you know, the response is about. It doesn't really mention it in a very detailed way or substantive way. It's a very surface level, and you could almost use that same response for every student. Okay, so what I would say is 1, 3, and 4 count as examples of RSI, and number 2 does not. Okay. And then, yeah, and then we'll skip over the last activity because we just don't have time. But if you wanted to practice yourself, you could, you know, take a look at that, and you always feel free to reach out to me with any questions.
All right, thanks, Sally. So I'm just going to go over some places in Canvas where we can leave feedback. And these are common areas where RSI can occur, and most likely the first places that evaluators are going to look for. So for example, our announcements and discussions. And as mentioned before, many of us are already using these, so continue to use them with the clarified methods in the RSI definitions that were shared. The Zoom integration in Canvas, it allows us to set up our office hours. And so again, you can just enable it in your courses, set up the times and dates for it to be a recurring meeting. And then students, when they click on that Zoom link, then they can just automatically see your office hour links there. Additionally, you can create an office hour page that you add to each module, or create a specific office hours sort of link and page with all of the dates and times for the entire semester. I will be going over in a little bit of detail Rubrics, the Speedgrader, and Gradebook, because these are other areas that you can provide feedback on student coursework. But I also wanted to provide some reminders in the next couple slides here. And so we mentioned rubrics earlier in our conversation, and it's a good tool to help us to identify or clarify for students different criteria that we're expecting in their coursework. And so when using a rubric for grading, if a student is missing something or they don't get the full ratings for a specific criteria, there is a comment box here that allows us to leave additional feedback to explain why a student may not have got the full points or whatnot. And so again, utilizing this comment area to give specific and personalized feedback for students. As a reminder though, if you do want to use the rubric for assignment grading and you want the scores from the rubric to sync to your gradebook, make sure that in the settings you check the box that says use this rubric for assignment grading. If this box is not checked, and as you're scoring the students' work and everything, it won't be automatically entered into the gradebook. And so remember, if you're using a rubric and you want it to be used as the grade for the assignment, go in the rubric settings and check this box then. In SpeedGrader for our assignments, there is an assignment comment box on the right-hand side as well. One of the things I do want to point out here is they do have an option for us to add course links. So maybe it's specific, maybe a student completely missed a topic or a concept and whatnot in their submission. And so what I can do is I can click on this link here and specifically attach maybe the page that had that content in it, or maybe it was a file that I included in my modules that the student missed. But in my feedback here, I can link those course items in here so that when a student reads it, they can just click on it and review any of the course materials to help them better understand or help them to complete the assignment for a future submission and whatnot. We also mentioned the comment library. And so this little icon here is the comment library in SpeedGrader. You check it out, see if you like it. Some do, some don't. But it allows you to store and save any commonly used comments that you have. It doesn't allow you to filter or anything like that. So as you keep adding comments, it's just gonna keep saving them over and over. But it will be there for you to be able to just automatically paste into this comment box, and then you can make edits as necessary. Other instructors, they also use, again, like Word documents, a Google Doc, or something else to save their commonly used comments. And so whichever method would work best for you. I also want to mention that if you do use the comment library, it is associated with your Canvas account. And so it doesn't matter if you're teaching, you know, 2 different courses or whatnot, you'll still have access to all of the comments that you saved to the comment library here. Additionally, you can also attach files, or if you wanted to do a screen capture or an audio comment, you are able to provide those types of feedback for students as well. In the gradebook, for any assignment, you can hover over the title itself and select the 3 dots to message students who. And so if you notice, you know, there's quite a few students who haven't submitted yet, this would be an easy way for you to send all of the students a message as a reminder, or maybe it's after the due date and you're still accepting late work. You know, again, you can message all of those students at once. On the student end, the messages will appear as an individual message though. And so again, just using this to help you to reach out and monitor students' work. This is also a good way to acknowledge and notify students who may be, you know, more punctual and are submitting their work on time. And so these positive affirmations go a long way with students to help them to stay motivated and everything.
And I just want to say on that note, if you are feeling a little down, if you're getting a little overwhelmed and you want to feel good, send the students who got, you know, good scores on an assignment, send them a message telling them that they did a great job. The responses that you will get back from your students, it just really makes your day. It's awesome. Yeah.
Additionally, in the gradebook, if you select a student's name, it'll open up this grade detail tray on the side here. And so it gives you sort of an overview of that specific student's submissions and work. If you needed to, you can click on the message or the mail icon here to send that individual student a message. Additionally, when you click on the cell and open the grade detail tray, it'll provide you sort of that box to leave a comment for the student also. And so there are multiple ways in the gradebook here for you to be able to message your students then. Another way that you can get feedback from your students is to use the Canvas practice quizzes or ungraded quizzes. You can use this to gather information or feedback from students. This could be at the end of a module, or maybe they just completed and submitted a large project, or maybe it was your midterm. For either of these, students don't receive a grade, but they still can go in and respond to the questions then. For the practice quiz, when you create the practice quiz, as you add questions, Canvas automatically adds 1 point to each one, but you can go in and you can edit it so that it appears as 0 points, just so that it doesn't confuse your students. For ungraded survey, you do have the option to make the responses anonymous. And so again, using either one of these, just to get feedback from students or to get information for you could be helpful. So as we're leaving students' feedback and comments, we want to make sure that our students know and are aware of where to go to view our feedback. Students will see a notification by their grades when they log into the course. So if an assignment has been graded, there will be a notification of the score. If there was a rubric that was used and we left some comments on the rubric, that will show up as a notification as well. Any of the submission comments or assignment comments that we left for students, they'll see this icon as well too, indicating that, hey, there's a message from your instructor here. And so again, clicking on any of these, it'll show directly in their grades area, or a student can click on the title of the assignment and they'll be able to view your feedback, view your comments, and also be able to view your rubric with your comments inside the rubric. And so again, just reminding students of where to go to read and view your feedback from them. All right, are there any questions on the Canvas section here?
There's one comment that I'm just not sure about this. So Mateo is saying that he's noticed that the sending messages to students who button doesn't work on the weekends. I'm gonna try it tomorrow to see if that's true, but I don't remember that.
Yeah, I didn't either. It's kind of odd behavior too, because I work in 2 different schools' Canvas sites, and both of them are doing it. And I don't remember that being the case, with prior classes. So I'm not sure if something changed in, a setting from instructor or whatnot.
Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of when the last time I did grading on a weekend was. I don't know if it's been it's been a little while maybe, so sorry.
Yeah, we're working tomorrow too, so we'll check that out. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, just something I noticed. I wasn't sure if anyone else had run into that.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing it up. We'll look into it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So as I mentioned, I also wanted to provide the resources that ACCJC is using when they're evaluating our courses. Let me copy the link to provide it. Oops. And so a peer evaluator who is reviewing our DE courses, this is what they would use to assess our online courses. And so really, again, they're looking at those different methods for substantive interaction, and they're just checking, is there direct, is there evidence of direct instruction, or in the assessments, is there feedback, is there group discussion facilitation, and so on and so forth. And then same with regular interaction. And then they just conclude does this course meet the RSI policy requirements or not? Now, ACCJC also provided a resource to help institutions to improve their process of and quality of having RSI in their DE courses. And so let me provide you that rubric as well. And what you'll really want to do is take a look at this and for both of the parts, so substantive and also regular in action. And here they've listed each of those different methods. And then they have the ratings for initial, which is sort of at the lower level, to highly developed. And so, you know, looking at your courses and your interactions, you know, where would you place yourself, and, you know, how can you sort of enhance or improve on moving towards maybe emerging or developed. Our main goal is to move up, so we're not at the initial sort of ranking. But again, this is going to take some time, and so again, just reflecting on our own courses, where are we at, and how can we improve to make sure that we have RSI present in our courses. And as mentioned, again, here's the regular interaction. And so again, just reading through that and looking at our courses, what we're currently doing and what are areas that we can improve on. All right, so a quick recap of what we went over today. We shared with you the FCC RSI policy, which provides guidance on the regulations and around DE and RSI. We also shared with you some examples and about meaningful feedback in SpeedGrader or even in discussions. We shared with you different areas where we can provide students feedback and how students can view our feedback for them. And then also, again, just the ACC-JC rubric that is used for evaluating our DE courses. I do want to mention that we have one final workshop in our series here. This one is focused on RSI Blueprint, creating a consistent interaction plan for our courses. Again, we will have two sessions. One is in person on Wednesday, April 23rd, and then we will have another session on Zoom on that Friday. This one, we will take a look at our courses and identify, okay, you know, what are things that we're currently doing that already meet RSI? All right, so let's check that off. I'm going to continue to do those things. Where can I implement RSI? Or where am I missing or lacking RSI? Okay, you know, this is an area I want to focus on and to improve. So again, this entire session will just be us reflecting on our DE courses, what we're doing, and then finding areas where we can improve on. And so we'll leave this session with an individualized sort of plan that you can use as you're working on either your summer courses or fall courses. Additionally, the state chancellor's office, as well as the as our accreditor and the statewide Senate, Academic Senate, and the statewide DE coordinators organization, they are putting on an informational webinar about distance education RSI. I think it was mentioned, I don't recall if we'd mentioned it today, but the rubric that I shared, that was a part of a pilot with ACC-JC in the fall. And so because we were already going through our accreditation process, our review was part of that pilot rubric was used in our review. And so as these other institutions and colleges are also going through accreditation, that rubric is now being used to assess their DE courses. And so this is still a very sort of new area where institutions are still finding where how can we help our instructors ensure that there's RSI present and what are evaluators looking for and everything. So there's still clarification and information coming about that. And so I think I see it as a good thing for us because we were sort of the guinea pigs on it. So now we know what we need to do. And so as we continue to hear from other institutions and as we continue to hold these sessions and workshops and whatnot, we'll get better and we'll continue to learn from each other about that. Okay, so we have a few minutes here for any additional questions or if there were questions in the chat.
And then while you're thinking of questions or typing questions, just to give you a little more information about the way that the accreditation process works. The accreditors, they looked at courses that took place in the spring of 2024. They did it after the semester ended, and the courses were randomly selected out of all the, again, fully online asynchronous courses that we offer here at Fresno City. What the accreditors are looking for is a passing grade, whatever you want to call it, would mean that of the courses that they looked at, 85% or more of them is supposed to have adequate RSI. So that was not the case for us. We didn't make that that cutoff. At that point, they look at more courses, okay, and just to see, well, maybe it was just a coincidence, or they just got unlucky, and so they review another set of courses. And then they try to see if, okay, in those courses, if 85% or more of those courses have adequate RSI, according to our Academic Senate RSI policy, then we're good to go. But again, they didn't find that. So there was a core inquiry on it, meaning that they are going to I guess you could say give us a ding, or give us a kind of like a warning about it. And in 18 months time, the same accrediting team will come back again, and again they will look at a number of courses. I'm not exactly sure what the number is, but it will be randomly selected, and they will go through the courses and look for instances of RSI. And again, they're wanting to just go as quickly as they can, just see that you're doing that in your course. If you are, give you a check mark, yes, this one does, this one doesn't. And so that our goal is to have at least 85% of our courses meeting adequate RSI. Yeah, so it does vary between, these are individuals. There's a lead person on the accrediting team, and then there's usually a team of 3 individuals made up of faculty and administrators from different community colleges. And they're first and foremost, they're looking at our RSI policy. Okay, so we have listed, what the Academic Senate approved, what we should be doing in our courses. And then they're gonna want to go through your course shell. Remember, it's already finished. They can see everything. They can see your announcements, they can see your discussions, they can see all of the feedback that you've given within the Speedgrader. They can see everything. And what they can't see is, or at least this past time, they could see inbox messages. So while sending students messages in the inbox is, great, encouraged, that's a good thing to do, the accrediting team isn't necessarily going to see that. I know a lot of us contact our students. It's a real easy way to send a message out through an inbox message to everyone that's in the class. I would encourage you to, if you are doing that, instead make an announcement, send it as an announcement in your class. So that way it's documented within your class. That's a real easy change that you can make. And then, again, you want to have 2 different types of RSI per week regularly. So if you are if you're doing a weekly announcement in the class every week where you're kind of walking them through the next assignments, talking about what you did last week, to kind of connect it, that's a great practice to have. That's a great thing to do. Another thing is, if you have those discussions, if you have them regularly or each week, making sure that you get into the discussions and that you are responding, to, again, not every student, but peppering your responses in there. That I definitely would encourage people to do that. And then, again, on the SpeedGrader, if you could choose 1 assignment per week or 1 assignment every other week so that it's a regular practice to really give some substantive, comments, substantive feedback to most of your students, then doing those things is gonna set you on the right path. Or, additionally, for those of us who have office hours, I know, I don't know what the situation is with adjuncts being paid for office hours. I know it just keeps changing. But even if you are not being paid, if you could, possibly do a 1-hour office hour a week where you open up a Zoom session and you put it on your syllabus. A great thing to do is to make an announcement, I don't know, a half an hour, 15 minutes before, make an announcement in your class saying, office hour coming up, here's the Zoom link. I'll be there if you have any questions. And, just make it a regular practice of yours. That counts as an instance of RSI. That's a really pretty easy thing to do. Yeah, so at first, Sarah, there were some problems with what the accrediting team could see. Ultimately, they did have access to everything. Now, when you are doing, as when you're doing your, peer evaluations, when you're evaluating someone's online course or they're evaluating your online course, then we can't see the SpeedGrader. We can't see the messages within SpeedGrader. That's one thing that we're blocked from. But the accrediting team they did have access to everything, the whole course. Yeah, okay, so the weekly office hours for adjuncts, I think it's like a certain number of hours, like 12 or something like that. If you even if they're not every single week, if they are regular and you do have them posted in your syllabus, and as a double bonus, you make an announcement, that's a good practice. Okay. Oh, yeah, maybe it depends on how many, as an adjunct, how many units you have, right? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, we are officially done. I have a few more minutes to stick around if anyone has any last questions or comments. But other than that, yeah, hope to see you next time or at the watch party that we are trying to plan. Yeah, office hours, not the greatest, right? Because you're doing it at your convenience, not necessarily the student's convenience. But in terms of what the accreditation team is looking for, it doesn't matter if no students ever show up to your office hours. As long as you have them, as long as you post them, and make it easy for students to come, that does count.